Iowa Wrestling loses the number one ranked wrestler for the class of 2026 as Bo Bassett decommits. The future of Iowa Wrestling on shaky grounds.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. I've been covering the Hawkeyes for over 20 years on the radio here in the state of Iowa, including currently on the Iowa Sports Radio Network. We have stations in Des Moines, our flagship, 106.3 KXNO, along with Sioux City, Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, and the Quad Cities. You can hear me each weekday talking Hawkeyes and the world of sports from noon until 2. Today's episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Number one ranked Bo Bassett, committed since February, to the Hawkeye wrestling program, has decommitted. A decommitment hurts, but with this wrestler, this kind of stature, and the future of the program could be in peril. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. David Eickholt also going to join us from HawkeyeInsider.com. We'll talk a little bit about Bassett. We'll talk a lot of Iowa football and his thoughts on what we're going to see coming up in the 2025 Iowa football season. But we begin today with some good news because, well, there's not a whole lot of it with the Bo Bassett news. Let's start on the football front, though, and take a look as Iowa has picked up another commitment for the class of 2025. So the recruiting weekend, the one that is always targeted for Iowa football, fell on the weekend of June 20th. Iowa invited 4 uncommitted prospects in for their official visits. Also on the visits were all the guys that were committed to the program already. They went through their official visits, and what they like to do is bring the guys that are already ready to be Hawkeyes and then bring those uncommitted guys together and try to seal the deal with them. 4 prospects. We talked a lot about them last week. As always, you can go back, take a look at our podcast from a week ago where we broke things down a little bit deeper with each of these prospects. But the commitment comes from Kasen Thomas, Sioux City Heelan linebacker, 6'2", 217 pounds, makes his verbal commitment to the Hawkeyes. Thomas told HawkeyeReport.com, "I've been planning on it since I first got my offer there a year ago. What ultimately made me choose Iowa was the people and the development of their players," unquote. Top 300 player by On3, had offers from Arizona, Nebraska, Iowa State. That's where he took his official visits. Those 3 programs, along, of course, with Iowa this past weekend. Also, K-State, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Minnesota. A lot of offers for him, and a guy that was productive. Now, most productive, actually, on the other side of the football, as a running back. 20 touchdowns on the ground, nearly 2,000 yards rushing a year ago. How about this, though? He had 44.5 tackles last year, 15.5 tackles for a loss, though, as he becomes the 11th commitment for the class of 2026 for the Iowa program. So if you've been watching for a while, if you're an everydayer, I bring it up from time to time. You might see me doing a remote podcast from over in Sioux City. Do it because that's where my wife's from. And so got to know some people from Sioux City, know a couple of people also in the industry, and talk to them about Kasen Thomas. Nothing but great things to say about him just as an individual, a kid that puts in the work. Don't have to worry about that. He is built like an Iowa football player. But one thing that I got going back to a year ago when I first talked to a few people about Kasen is that this is a guy that feels like his best upside is still to come, that he is just scratching the surface as a football player. When you're talking about kind of that raw athleticism coupled with continuing to build into the game and building himself up to be a linebacker, this is a guy that is going to be one that people are really, really excited about. Now, this class of 2026, heavy on the offensive line, got a couple of wide receivers coming in, also picked up a commitment with the other commitment over the weekend, and that's Ronnie Hill. So we go there next. Ronnie Hill, different kind of recruiting profile than what we're talking about at Kasen Thomas, where Kasen Thomas, has got these upper Midwest offers, kind of everybody that is involved. That is not the case with Ronnie Hill, but he took a visit last week to Iowa. This is a kid with a bunch of MAC offers, didn't have anything at the Power 4 level. However, Iowa offered, he visits very quickly. He is ready to make the decision. We talk about this a ton, and it's very simple, but I think it has to be our line of thinking currently. If Phil Parker likes him, we're going to be okay with it. And that has to be the case with Ronnie Hill. So 2 commitments over the week for Iowa. Still waiting on a couple from over the weekend. CJ Hilliard, the headliner of the class, the 4-star cornerback from Florida. Sounds like his decision is going to be coming up here. Still a couple of weeks to go on that for CJ Hester. Another name to know coming up this week, perhaps, is Darian Jones. Older brother is at Nebraska. Older brother was an Iowa guy. And so that will be interesting to see the way that one plays out. Good buzz, an Omaha native, but Iowa in good line. One other thing I want to mention, going back to Kasen Thomas, because I mentioned talking to a few people that knew his recruitment a little bit. And as of a couple of weeks ago, Iowa had ground to make up. And it was relayed to me that it was likely they were probably third behind Nebraska and Iowa State for his services for Kasen Thomas. And yet Iowa was able to make up that ground. It shows you what a good job that they do on these official visits and the hit rate that Iowa's had recently. We've argued, should this date move up? Iowa's missed a bunch of prospects that they were after, that they were hoping to get in this weekend. And because of that, there is talk. That's something that Iowa football will figure out and needs to figure out if the date needs to move up a little bit further. However, when it comes to Kasen Thomas, it shows you that they made up the ground. They got his commitment, and what they do during this weekend goes a long way. So that's another name to know coming up this weekend. And finally, Julian Manson, legacy recruit, 6'4", 225, son of Jason Manson. Remember him playing wide receiver, playing a little quarterback for Iowa in the Iowa football program with his dad working for the program. You don't say anything's a lock. It's recruiting. You're still talking about 17, 18-year-old kids, but this one feels very good. And if they can get, after the commitment of Kasen Thomas, if they also get Julian Manson and Darian Jones, I think you're feeling great about this weekend. And then you wait and try to hit that Hail Mary with CJ Hester. But some good news there. We'll talk about the bad news of the weekend and Bo Bassett coming up here a little bit later on. We got David Eickholt waiting in the wings. We got a lot of football talk to get into with David. We'll get his thoughts on Bo Bassett. A lot of crazy rumors also rolling around about that. What led to the decommitment of Bo Bassett? We'll talk about that as we continue on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Summer sports finished up, and with baseball season here, now it is time for baseball. Under the lights, you got golf on the green. How about soccer? FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You've already followed the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Trent Condon, David Eickholt, hanging out with me here today. Eickholt, big news yesterday on the wrestling front. Bo Bassett, top prospect in the class of 2026, has decommitted from Iowa wrestling. God told him Iowa wasn't the place anymore.
There's really no good comeback for me. There's really no good response. It's certainly a strange kind of the way everything's sort of unfolded here, but
because this kid stretched out his recruitment a long time.
He did. And I'll also say this, our message board has been pretty much crashing out about the news.
Yeah.
Because, I put all my focus on football, men's basketball, women's basketball. Like, I know enough about Bo Bassett to the point of like, oh, this is really, really big news.
Because he's not only a great wrestler, which he is, but also it's the extra with him. He has a social media following.
He has social media following, and he gets along with a lot of peers. Mm-hmm. He's just wired the way the great ones need to be wired.
The way his recruitment went, the build up to it, Iowa getting his commitment. And the hope was that he was going to be kind of the Pied Piper. He was going to be the Spencer Lee. It's not just him.
They were hoping that he was going to be the start of closing the gap to Penn State. Mm-hmm. And now sounds like Penn State's going to get a home visit with him this week. And I'll tell you, if I'm Iowa right now, I'm praying he doesn't go Nebraska or Penn State. And those are two of the final three. You're really hoping he goes to Stillwater.
Yeah.
And that's still very painful for probably Iowa fans to admit, but you'd rather him go there than stay in the Big Ten.
So any insight at all about what happened, what actually went down? Because there's a lot of rumors out there.
There's a lot of rumors. Honestly, man, I have not been able to decipher enough through it to confidently report on anything. So when we talk about this over the next couple of minutes, this is strictly what I've read rumor-wise. I'm not reporting anything. Make sure about that. I mean, there's some people in the wrestling world that thinks that there were some disagreements between the Iowa coaches and the family.
Okay.
And that's probably been the most consistent rumor I have seen. But again, I cannot independently tell you that that's the reason.
Interesting. Let's get into the Hawkeyes. Talked a little bit about Bo Bassett earlier, his decommitment from the wrestling program. But I want to go first to football recruiting. 4 official visitors on campus this week. Also got a commitment from a guy that they got an offer from last week at the cornerback position. But let's start with the official visitors, the uncommitted guys that came in with a bunch of the committed guys. What can you tell us how things went in Iowa City?
Well, let me put it this way. I just am about to submit a crystal ball.
Okay.
For a top prospect.
Oh, watching how the sausage is made over there.
In state, just doing some texts on my phone, getting some good intel. Our own Alan True already logged one for a player. Again, in-state prospect. I think people will be really happy with that. But yeah, oddly enough, too, it's so interesting watching this weekend unfold because one of Iowa's top targets is Omaha native Darian Jones. That's the younger brother of former Iowa reporter Dallas Jones, who got a chance to be on the other side of things. So I thought that was kind of a cool thing for him to be able to experience. From what I'm hearing, it's basically down to Iowa and Nebraska. Remember, he does have another brother already on Nebraska's roster, but he's a cornerback, grew up following Iowa, grew up an Iowa fan. Don't think you'll get much better training than Phil Parker. So from everything I've been told, the visit went really well. That's not a recruitment that I think lasts very long. I think he'll look to commit somewhere in the next couple of weeks. I mean, I'd give Iowa probably the slight edge right now. Okay. But at the same time, do post-visit highs wear down? Yeah. Right. I mean, that's why I struggle to really try to read too much into it till 4 or 5 days after, maybe a week after, talk to some sources, talk to sometimes the kid himself to get a grasp of where they're at. But right now, I'm not going to be surprised if there are 2 or 3 more commitments in the next couple of weeks here from this weekend. Sioux
City Heelan Kasen Thomas, Bishop Heelan kid for our listeners up in Sioux City. Sounded like Nebraska, Iowa State, maybe even led coming into this weekend. But from what I heard, maybe Iowa covered some ground this weekend at minimum.
That's the crystal ball.
That's the crystal ball. There it is.
There
All right. A good one there.
Again, I'm not going to say it's a done deal, but I really like where Iowa is sitting. And so do a couple of our more national recruiters. Again, Alan True logged crystal ball in for him as well.
Let's get into this football team coming up this season. And as we talked about earlier with the Big Ten, there's an opportunity here. Yes, there's no Michigan or Ohio State on the schedule. But there's also 4 teams from the playoff last year. Another team that was a game away from being in the college football playoff. This schedule, very simply, if Iowa goes 10-2, they're going to be in the college football playoff.
No doubt, and you have to reward them.
Even if they lose to both Oregon and Penn State. They beat everybody else on that schedule.
That means you're going to beat an Iowa State team that'll probably be, one of the more bigger contenders in the Big 12. At least that also means you beat Indiana at home. That also means you go to Nebraska and win at Nebraska, which again, we know it hasn't been
You problem. Go to USC and get a win there. Yeah. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. Even you take those 2 heavy heads and you put them for L.
I believe they go at Minnesota as well.
At Wisconsin. I don't think Wisconsin's going to be that good, but it's still going to be a road victory. You're going to have that much on your resume.
Luke Fickell will not be the coach next year.
But can they get there? And specifically, defensively, the linebackers are incredibly green. Quarterback spot was an issue all year long. And though CJ Hall allegedly took the step here this spring, you got to have at least 2 out there. We'll talk about the offense momentarily, but I still have those reservations about the defense because they did take a step back last year.
Yeah, and I have more questions about the defense than the offense.
Wild.
That's not to say that I think the offense is going to be better than the defense, but I think we have a general idea of where the offense is, or at least there's some sort of realistic expectation that I think most people will be able to say. I don't know what to expect out of this defense.
It's weird.
I will say the one thing I do know, I love Iowa's defensive line depth. I think they have a lot of different pieces, and I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Iowa's defensive line to help cover up some of the bigger question marks, which again, I think right now we're at corner and linebacker. We know how much work people have gotten in that linebacker room, but it's just from the sole standpoint of they haven't gotten reps, in-game reps. Right. But we've heard for so long, Jay Higgins, Nick Jackson, all these guys really didn't do much in the spring. So all the guys behind them took all their reps. That's great for a time like this. But do you know how much pressure there's going to be on the Mike linebacker? And it's not fair to the Mike linebacker because just look at the tradition that's been established there. I think Xavier Wampa's going to piece it together.
Okay.
I really do. I love Cohen Entringer. He was one of my favorite kids in that recruiting class. I think he was way too under the radar. Assuming he is 100% and can stay healthy, I think he's a guy that's going to be a difference maker as well. I think that's as athletic of a safety pairing that we've had in a long while, as far as size, speed, strength, like just the length that they'll have back there. Defensive tackle, I think Bryce Hawthorne, Jonah Pace were huge. I really like Bryce Hawthorne's upside. But then I also look at a guy who I led my breakout series with. I'm still working on it. I love Max Llewellyn. I just see him as a guy that can take that next step as an edge rusher, an every down edge rusher, not sort of just pin your ears back and go make something happen. Can Aaron Graves take that next step? I think he's a Sunday player as well.
What I saw the release about him being listed on the field steal as I don't remember if it was all Big Ten or all American, but regardless, his counting stats last year were even better than I thought. And they kind of came in clumps. If you get more consistency out of Graves and he's able to do that and be that impact guy all 12 games, I think we're having a different conversation.
I do too. I also think he's going to be the guy that it steps up in that defensive line room, really establishes himself as leader. We didn't even mention Ethan Hurkett either.
Yeah.
They get Ethan Hurkett back. Like they have options. And then you look at some of the younger defensive line prospects. They're really excited about them too.
So I can't remember if it was you or somebody else I was talking to. So they went out. You mentioned the depth at defensive tackle, getting Pace out of Central Michigan, getting Bryce Hawthorne from South Dakota State.
Yep.
And at the time it was, Pace is the guy that's going to help out right away. Hawthorne's more kind of maybe a developmental guy. And Hawthorne, he's turned some heads over there. He's going to be, I think, probably a bigger part of the rotation than we thought back when he committed. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah. I think that's the easiest way to sum it all up. From everything I've heard, he's really gravitated toward the system. He's a really good fit, and he just brings a couple different things that maybe, the defensive tackle unit specifically just doesn't have. Again, he's still a little bit green, but there's a lot of tools that you can work with and mold. And again, I think you trust Jay Neiman and Kelvin Bell to be able to go do that.
Absolutely. And Pittman, maybe he is just a rotational piece. He is more of that 15 to 20 snap guy. Well, now with the depth that they've created, with Pace and Hawthorne coming on. And, we'll see if, the veterans that have been hanging around, a Hubert, a Gaffney, one of those guys can give you, again, those rotational pieces. But if they're their fifth guy, you're feeling pretty good about that and what you're going to have up front and being able to create that. But we go to offense. And yes, we have to talk offense. So let's get over there and let's start with Mark Gronowski. What have you heard as he is back out there working out, going through the off-season workouts, working with those receivers?
100%. He's 100%. He's back. And this is why I've tried to tell people, there's such a big difference between what Cade McNamara went through and what Mark Gronowski went through injury-wise. The value that Mark Gronowski got of going through spring practice, he did not throw. But guess what? He could line up under center.
Yeah.
He could do all the footwork pieces. He could call out the plays. He could do a mimic run through and then point with his offhand where he would have thrown the football. Again, that's not an actual live ball rep, but the mental growth that he can show and really gravitate toward that's going to pay off. Like Cade couldn't even do anything.
Right. Couldn't push off. Yeah.
And then you think about his recovery timeline. He wasn't even 100% till damn near August.
Yeah.
Right. So, and the other part is Gronowski played through that injury all last year. He did not need to have the surgery, but this is really going to help him comfortability wise.
Yeah.
It was the right decision to make. So everything I've heard, he's really killed it. He's been awesome in the weight room specifically, just as far as rallying the guys up, attention to detail, and all that other kind of stuff. So again, it's everything you want to hear. But again, this is a guy who has 10,000 all-purpose yards. He's won the FCS Heisman. Winning translates across all levels. Case in point, how about Kurt Signetti? Oh, look at Iowa basketball. Look at Ben McCollum. Winning translates. Mark Gronowski knows how to win. And that's a big deal when you think about this kind of program.
They have as good of a right tackle as anybody in college football, Jennings Dunker, as long as he's back completely healthy.
Yep.
Center position is set with Logan Jones. You feel good about Bo Stevens.
You know what you're getting out of Bo Stevens,
Yes.
I think.
Peeper, they love the dude. And he's a little bit undersized, but he's a butt kicker. He's that small town guy that
I've heard he's put up some good weight on some good weight.
And that's a good thing to hear.
He's needed to do that. Then of course they bring in Bryce George, the Ferris State offensive lineman.
So can he play left tackle? I mean, talking to your scouts and what you've seen, is he a guy that they feel very comfortable? He is a left tackle.
He can play inside or outside.
Okay.
And I think that's the kind of piece you want. I think ultimately what's going to end up happening is George Barnett's going to play the 5 best guys.
Mm-hmm.
They'll figure out the position later. Does he have a shot at doing that? Yeah, but Trevor Lauk's going to be right there as well. How about Jack Doetzler?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's going to be a legitimate competition between those three. For probably 2 spots, I'd say.
Lauk, the biggest upside of that group. I mean,
I would say
do they feel like they're still building him up, because they beat a lot of good teams for him too coming out of high school?
Yeah, I mean, I think because of everybody's so focused on Proctor, they didn't realize how good Trevor Lauk actually is, or how many different schools were after him. I don't want to say he's a year away still, because I think he has a shot, but I'm going to be very interested because talking to George Barnett a couple of times, you think about his first couple of years at Iowa. I know people were, throwing their arms up about how he wasn't good and he needed to be fired. You know what the reality of the situation was, Trent? They were playing guys that should not have played that early.
Right.
And that's not an indictment on the players themselves. Mm-hmm. They're only doing the best at what they can. And then, I think George Barnett was an excellent coach from this standpoint too. He never threw his guys under the bus. He took all the arrows from everybody. It's well intended. I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
There were expectations set, but guys should not have been playing that early in their career. So it'll be very interesting to see how the offensive line unfolds. I have question marks about tight end, probably more than almost any other position. I liked what I saw wide receivers in spring. I think it's deeper.
They have depth there.
I don't think that they have necessarily an all-conference caliber guy, but Mark Gronowski is going to have some pieces to throw the football too.
That's a difference at that spot, no doubt. David Eickholt with us here. Thanks as always to David for joining us, and we'll have a little more content from David a little bit later on the week as he was at Iowa basketball practice last week. We will get into that. Well, let's get back to the big news of the weekend. Bo Bassett decommitting. We'll talk about that, what it means for the future of Iowa wrestling, and some big questions that are out there. Bo Bassett talk next on Locked On Hawkeyes. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. And a shout out to you everydayers with us each and every day. Thank you to all of you with us throughout these days. As we continue Locked On Hawkeyes, Bo Bassett, I talked about a little bit there with David Eickholt. The rumors that are out there, there's a ton, all right, back and forth. But it feels at the base of everything. And from most of the reports that are out there, and moving away from the rumor mill that is out there, is this came down to the Hawkeye Wrestling Club, the independent club for postgraduates, and the ability to work in conjunction with the University of Iowa wrestling program. And was there pushback from the brands? Because this is what other programs are doing. This is what Penn State is doing. And that's the most important one we're looking at as Iowa looks to chase down Penn State and what they built and the championships that they had, and trying to build back on that and getting to that level. It feels like you're fighting for second so many years, but with a recruit like Bo Bassett, that's what made this different. It's not just that Bo Bassett's a great wrestler, because he is. And as we talked about his commitment back in February, it's the extra. This is a guy with a social media following. This is a guy that is beloved in the wrestling community. And this is a guy that has the kind of personality, the kind of swag. What do they call now these days, the kids? The Riz. He's got the charisma that he's going to bring guys with him. And he's going to bring his younger brother, the number 1 wrestler in the class of 2027. And then yet another younger brother in the class of 2028. So you have that component. But it's not just about the family. It goes deeper than that. I don't know the inner workings of what's happening with the Hawkeye Wrestling Club and the University of Iowa. But as you look at these programs, and now you look at the war chest of financial ability that Oklahoma State has built, and the way that Penn State has been doing it for years, and Iowa still is in good shape financially. However, when you look to the future, you got to get the dudes. And the question remains out there. Is Tom Brands, Terry Brands, are they the guys in this new environment of college athletics, and specifically college wrestling, Are these the guys that are going to be able to deliver and get Iowa back to the top of the heap? And when you have a story like that, those questions are pertinent. They might not be fair. The biggest question I always have when that comes up, who? Hit me up in the comment section on YouTube. Let me know if you had the ability to move on from Tom Brands as the head coach. What direction are you going? Is it Kyle Dake? Spencer Lee? Probably not ready. What other names would make sense? What other names can get Iowa to this level? What David Taylor's doing at Oklahoma State, what Cale Sanderson's been doing for years at Penn State. If I was going to compete and get back to competing at national levels, and I know there's the other side. I know there's plenty of you out there that aren't wrestling fans. Yeah, Iowa fills out the building, but we're still talking about a niche sport, even as important as wrestling is. And there's plenty of people out there that say, it doesn't matter. All that matters is football. There's people that say wrestling doesn't matter. Basketball doesn't matter. Baseball, softball, track and field, wrestling, on and on and on. Those don't matter. All that matters is football. And you should be doing everything in your financial ability to help your football program. Other sports be damned. I don't subscribe to that theory. I want a well-rounded athletic department. I like to cheer for all the teams, watch all the teams. That's me. But I know there's other people that have that thought. Interesting terms, interesting changes happening, and certainly the future of Iowa wrestling took a blow with the decommitment of Bo Bassett. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Hey, hit subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. Hit up the comment section over there. If you're listening on the podcast side, 5-star reviews helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. We'll be back with you tomorrow. More Hawkeye talk, your team every day. Until then, go Hawks.